Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the masterclass today with us. Please, I'm begging you guys, take it easy on me. I did not think it was going to be this many people. I prepared for only 30 people, and then I came, and then I see like it's a lot of you guys, but I'm really excited to have you all here. And thank you to the East African Philanthropy Conference for having us here as well. My name is Habi Sando, and I serve as the manager Africa and Middle East at Myriad USA. I work really closely with Kadi Silla, who serves as the director for the regions. She was here yesterday on the plenary session, and she unfortunately left, but I will have her contact information on the slides for those of you who would like to contact her. I also wanted to make a brief update. It seems like the logistical note wasn't updated. Kadi won't be here, as well as Rosina, I believe, but I'm joined by two incredible women and partners. Miriam Rachira, who is a Kenyan lawyer, gender justice advocate, and social impact leader with over 20 years of experience in advancing access to justice for marginalized populations. She's the founder and executive director of Justice Nest, who is a partner with Myriad USA, and she's sitting right here. And then we're also joined by Velma Abuya from Build Her. Build Her equips women with accredited, high-quality technical skills in construction, finished trades, breaking systemic barriers to secure dignified employment. Velma brings over a decade of corporate leadership experience and impact-focused strategy, and she leverages her experience to mobilize philanthropic resources to forge the cross-sector collaborations essential to scaling the organization's mission. These amazing women are sitting here today, and I'm excited to introduce them later on. Before we start off with the masterclass, I will take a poll of the room. There's been a rich and ongoing conversation around cross-border compliance, fiduciary responsibility, and tax architecture. So to bring these concepts to life and ground this masterclass in real lived experiences, I'd like to begin with a quick pulse check. By a show of hands, are there any organizations or individuals here or in your relevant networks who have struggled to receive donations from the US and felt that cross border compliance felt like a real barrier or even a wall? Wow, that's a lot of hands. Would anyone who raised their hands be willing to briefly share some of those challenges to ground our discussion? Yes, thank you. Let me share.
Let me sit because I'm a bit shy. Hi, everyone. My name is Justina Ezami, and I work with Teach for All as the Senior Development Associate. Before Teach for All, I work with Teach for Nigeria. Teach for Nigeria is a network partner of Teach for All, which is a global organization of network partners. With Teach for Nigeria, we tried to leverage the Nigerian diasporas to raise funds, and we felt we had like a lot of Nigerian diasporas in the US. One of the challenges that I faced trying to do that was, one, we were now required to have a legal entity in the US to be able to receive money. So it will go through that entity and then get to us. And one of the challenges with that, we are also asked, they will take some money. I think there were like some charges. And we're asking, if this money comes to us and we are doing donor reporting, how do we report? Let's say, for example, the donor donates 10,000 USD and you take 500. How do we report that 500 to the donor? Like, what would be the process like? And then also there were other suggestions about we could host a fundraising drive in the US. But then again, we didn't have the 5016 thing, so we were also not able to. So at the end of the day, we had to pause on that and start looking for like what platforms could we leverage to be able to get some funding from the diaspora network. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. You touched on a lot of insights that we'll touch on later, the 501c3 structure in the US. And then I also love how you touched on diaspora, because I think it's a very important component of fundraising that a lot of great African nonprofits have been leveraging to expand their missions. But you are completely correct. It's a very complicated and financially difficult and like administratively complex system to navigate, and we'll touch on that a little bit further in the conversation. Segueing back into what Myriad USA is and what we do, we're a philanthropic intermediary based in New York City, and we facilitate effective giving across borders. It's a lot of fancy terminology that's used in the sector, but I'd say that our work is multifold. We work with diverse audiences, including donors. So we help them structure vehicles that enable them to give internationally in a tax-compliant way. And we also, very importantly, translate the realities and opportunities across Africa and the Middle East so that they can better understand where their funding is going and the impact that it can achieve. What that basically means is that sometimes we'll have donors come to us and they're interested in giving to Burkina Faso because they're like, I did Peace Corps there X many years ago, but they don't understand the current realities on the ground. So Kadi and I's role, primarily Kadi's, is really translating those like direct on the ground realities to the donors, letting them know what vehicles are available for them to give, and what nonprofit institutions they can give to. However, I'd say that the core and heart of our organization is our second primary audience, who are our nonprofit organizations. Through our American Friends Fund model, which we call like our fiscal sponsorship solution, we support nonprofits in accessing US-based funding without the administrative burden of establishing a US entity, which she just mentioned, or managing the complex compliance requirements. Myriad USA handles the due diligence on the back end, ultimately allowing the nonprofits to focus on their core programming. Again, I have the honor of being joined by two incredible women and two of our partners who we've had the honor of working with since 2014. Miriam Wachira, again, I'll let her introduce herself more extensively. We've been working with her since 2014. And then Velma Obuya, who is the fundraising partnership and development lead at Build Her. We've been working with them since 2019. I don't want to touch too much into the work that they're doing because they will touch on that soon. But both organizations are working in sectors that are often represented in global philanthropy. Today's conversation will explore their experiences fundraising in the US, working with an intermediary, navigating niche sectors, partnering with Myriad USA, while reflecting on the broader challenges that remain in the philanthropic sector and the opportunities that lie ahead. So without further ado, I would love to hand the floor over to Miriam Wachira for her introduction, and then after we'll move to Velma.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good. How many of us have ever been arrested? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many of us have spent a night in prison? I only have one client here. My name is Miriam Wachira. I work with Justice Nest. At Justice Nest, we work to cover the justice gap. We run 2 programs. One program we run is a mothers and children program. We run that program because of what we call the justice gap. So one of the things you'll find, I'm looking whether my presentation is up. All right, I think we can proceed even without it. At Justice Nest, we run 2 programs. One of the programs we run is a mothers and children's program, where we represent mothers who are in prison, who have been charged with different offenses. You'll find that 90% of the women in prison in Kenya, and I'm guessing probably, I can confidently say maybe in Africa, is that they are single mothers. That tells you they're already at a socioeconomic status that is quite disadvantaged. So the reason we represent mothers and not necessarily women is because when a single mother is arrested and imprisoned, then we have created another society problem. The children are left with who? Sometimes back, about 4 years, I was a juvenile defense counsel where I represented children who are charged with different offenses. And from my experience is that all the children are represented, 96%, came from a single parent household. So that has been one of the reasons why I started that program for mothers, so that mothers can stay home with their children. So what we do with them, we ensure diversion. diversion from prosecution. We try our best that they are not prosecuted and that they do not end up in prison. As we are working with them on their legal cases, so we represent them. So I work with a group of lawyers, we represent them. As we are representing them, we have social workers taking care of their children back at home, following up the children. Where are they? Most of the time when we get to prison, when we ask a mother what they need from us, the first thing they say, I need you first to go and trace my children. I was arrested in town. I did not have time to go back and plan the children. So I left my children at home. They do not know where I am. So I would want you to follow up first to go and check on our children. So as we are working with them on their legal cases, we're also working with their children at home, making sure that they are safe and that their education is continuing. We work with the mothers beyond the legal system. So once they leave the legal system, we look for the cause. We ask ourselves, why was this mother arrested? Is there something that we can help them so that they do not get arrested again? So whatever the issue is, you'll see that part of our values is partnerships. And it's because we cannot do it all alone. So we refer our clients to other organizations that offer different services. So for instance, you'll find some mothers are in for GBV, are survivors of GBV, but they end up in prison themselves. So they need counseling, they need a lot of trauma counseling. So we refer them to organizations that offer that. Others you'll find it's lack of skills. That's why they were arrested. So we offer them the skills training. We connect them with organizations that offer skills training. So that is one of our programs. Our other program, we have prison-based paralegal program. In that program, we train inmates or incarcerated people together with the prison officers as paralegals. And then we open for them mini law firms within the prisons. They are supervised by a qualified advocate. That ensures that the quality of service they're offering is up to par. Why do we train paralegals? Again, 90% of those in prison cannot afford a lawyer in Kenya. And I want to believe that also applies to almost quite a number of African countries do not have public defender's office. So you'll find that most of those in prison are there alone. They do not understand what they were charged with. They're expected to go to court alone. The prosecutor is a lawyer. The magistrate or the judge is also a lawyer, and you're just there without knowing what is happening. So to cover that, with the paralegals, anybody who is arrested will come in with their papers, and they'll sit down with a paralegal who will help them to understand what their case is about. They will go through the witness statement with them and prepare them for court. And only then that we can say that the court made a fair decision because they got to hear both sides of the story. We also say we want everybody to actively participate in their trial. So sometimes you go to court and you hear somebody being asked, do you have a question for the witness? They say no, but it's because they do not know what question to ask. So those are the two programs that we run. We also have the juvenile justice program and child protection. Born from both programs because we have seen the children being left home by the mothers alone. They need a lot of protection and we need to follow them up. My journey with Myriad, I think I'll explain later, but they have been an enabler for us. This is our second year in making. If you could go to our impact slide. Yes, there. So far, we have trained 44 paralegals in prison, and those paralegals have served 1,912 clients, and out of those, 604 of them have left prison. We have represented 213 mothers. Out of those, 104 have left prison, connecting them or uniting them with 195 children. That has been done in less than 2 years. And you might ask, where did the funding come from or where did the power come from? Myriad was one of our enablers that allowed us to bring in the funds into Kenya to do that work. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Do I start with a question? Do I have everyone awake? Well, how many of us live in a house? How many of us live in a house? Show of hands. How many of us live in a house? Good. Great. There's a reason I asked that question. Most of us live in a house that has been constructed, right? Right? Have you ever wondered who constructed your house? No, exactly. But don't you imagine that this person really removed you from the wild one day? We used to live in the forest, right? Yeah. So I represent an organization called Build Her, okay? Build Her is a workforce development and transition system that trains women to move from none to no income into economic mobility through the construction trades. So what do? We essentially make the homemakers build the homes, right? Right? How many women are homemakers? All of us, right? Isn't it interesting that in the construction sector, at this particular point in terms of data, we have only 3% of women in the construction industry? And let us absorb that for a minute. 3% of women are in the construction industry at this particular point. And this is a lived reality across all continents. Please do not believe that it's an African problem. In fact, probably we had it better before, because traditionally women used to build homes, right? Yes, then modernization, industrialization made us believe that we can't construct homes. However, Build Her is in the construction industry, and we identify ourselves as a build enabler, a build and technical transition enabler for women. Ideally, I do not want to bore us with a lot of information, and I would like you to understand why this is an important conversation for us. We are changing who's building the future. I'm sure as you've looked around in Addis, and I think also a reality in most of our cities, there's a lot of infrastructure development that is ongoing. There's a lot of construction that is ongoing. In Kenya, back home, we are talking about affordable housing. However, as we're having this conversation about affordable housing, we are at the forefront trying to actually enable the ecosystem to understand that women need to be included in this industry, not as support system, but as the core enabler of how we decide the spaces we are living in, right? Good. So with that said, Build Her lives in a very unique sector where we are considered a TVET in some areas, and in some areas we are considered an empowerment and inclusion organization. Ideally, when we started, we were an empowerment ecosystem. However, as we continued working with the women, we realized that the construction system is very interesting, because the demand there is not inclusivity in the beginning, it is technical training. So what does Build Her do? We train women in construction finishing trades. Why? I'm sure you'd wonder. Because women have the finer detail. We have attention to detail. So what do we train our women in? We train our women in painting and decoration. We train our women in tiling. We train our women in carpentry and joinery, cabinetry, and recently this year we started solar installation. So it's very interesting that we have this at the background, because what we found hard in the beginning was explaining this story to a funder, because you're sitting in an intersection where you're, one, contributing directly to the private sector, and on the other side, you're contributing to inclusivity, which are still very important conversations to have. I think yesterday, one of the conversations we had at one of the masterclass was, how do you have two businesses with one mission? I don't know how many of us were in that particular masterclass. Yes. So we are a lived example of how you have two businesses with one mission. So when we're talking to industry, we're talking about technical skills. We're not talking women, we're talking technical skills first. We say our woman would bring in tiling and they'll be at the best level you would ever imagine, because we use international standards in our training center. Our training center is not even your typical school. It's not your typical TVET. It is an innovation hub where we take the women through a 12-month course, 6 months hard technical training, then 6 months placement. So why are we using this particular workforce system? It's purely because, I think you can go back to the slide, we realized there was a system failure in the construction industry. There were huge workforce gaps in terms of gender, and there was a hidden cost for the construction industry because you have a 6 months project, yeah? You're supposed to deliver on the 6 months project, then you're given unskilled labor. In Kenya, this is a reality. You have 84 to 90% of the participants in construction being unskilled labor, okay? So you'll find contractors would be interested in getting the labor force, however, they are unskilled. So we as a workforce transition system provided a solution which was, we will give you trained women who have technical training and expertise who would be able to help you deliver on your project on time without you incurring the cost of retraining, okay? So we also provide certification and we provide placement for these women. So that's one of the things we realized was one of the workforce gaps in the industry. Training doesn't produce site-ready workers in most of our countries. So that's also a failed system that we picked. And again, as I said, women were systematically excluded from this particular industry. Something that I hear and we've all said about, we've talked about since we started this conference, poverty persists. Women are really ecosystem drivers when it comes to removing poverty from the community. And we realize that construction is a multi-billion industry and women are not participating in it. When we looked around, what you're hearing is we're training women in agriculture, we're training women in entrepreneurship, we're training women, but the money is there, yes, but the money is really in the construction industry. From a lived experience, we have trained 1,000 women since we started in 2018, okay? 1,000 women. Out of those 1,000 women who used to earn $0 to a minimum of maybe $1, we have been able to get them to earning 6 times that, $6 and above per day on average. Okay, clap for us. Clap for us. Now, in addition, I want to introduce something interesting about that ecosystem is that these same women have also identified multiple pathways in the construction industry that did not exist before. So when you train a woman in a construction site, like on construction site, they will not end up just consistently being skilled labor that is getting a job in different sites. They end up creating different pathways where they become agents, paint agents. They own workshops where they deliver woodwork. Some of them open up furniture shops where they do furniture, curate furniture for homes. So ideally what we understood after a few years of training, that was somewhere between 2022 and 2023, is we were no longer an empowerment organization, but we were transitioning towards industry enabler and an ecosystem enabler as well. So this is where the challenge comes. Your donor originally believed you're an empowerment organization, and now you're switching and you're transitioning into a workforce system. However, you're still keeping to the original mission, which was empowerment. So ideally, this failed system, or rather the workforce system that failed, enabled us to transition our organization into a workforce system that still delivers on the original mission, which was female empowerment. Next, please. That's how we ended up creating our 5 Rs in terms of how we deliver job-ready, workforce-ready women into the construction industry. Why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because part of our fundraising strategy was to talk to the industry. And when we are talking to the industry, we're not talking to the industry only locally at home, but we're also talking to the industry across the globe. Where have we seen a benchmark? Where have we seen systems that work? And one of the places that this worked was in America, okay? So we realized that we were getting a lot of interest from American industries and friends who understood the mission we were trying to deliver. As we continued to fundraise, we realized that the challenge was explaining this locally and also globally without having presence in these particular markets. So that's where Myriad came in terms of supporting how we deliver fundraising as a strategy for our organization, especially when you're looking at multi-year support, okay? Ideally, we don't run project-based programs. We are in an ecosystem that is transitioning a system, construction system. So ideally, we are really taking in a lot of risks when it comes to training the women, because we're not only training the women. I want to marry this conversation to what Miriam had already talked about. We work with a lot of vulnerable women. We work with a lot of vulnerable women who have been systematically disadvantaged over a period of time. So I think I had lunch with someone and they asked me, do you have an age limit? Story time. I want to wrap up by talking about that story. We initially used to invite every woman to come and participate in our trainings, but then later on, we used to have, I'm sorry to say not used to, we used to have an age limit, an age gap. We used to have 18 to 35 apply for the scholarship, because it's a full scholarship. Then we realized that the women in their 40s were coming and they were more determined to deliver on the training compared to the younger ones. And that's where stories like what Miriam was talking about in terms of women who have been incarcerated coming out and not having any skills, we started finding that the more we took women from such disadvantaged environments and then trained them, they came with a lot of heavy stuff, yeah? So our program is wholesome. It's just not focusing on the technical aspect, but we're also focusing on their mental health. Construction industry is very male-dominated, and it also requires a lot of energy. So we do physical training, we do yoga, we do mental health training, just to make sure that by the time we're delivering this woman into the construction space, they are ready to actually be retained in the construction space, okay? So Myriad, as our fiscal sponsor, really helps us articulate this conversation when we are talking to people who do not have direct realities of what we are experiencing as a workforce development system in Kenya. So with that, or rather those few remarks, I would like to ask my colleague to join me. I'm sure Kadi has a lot of questions. Habi, you have a lot of questions, right?
Yes, of course.
Good.
See the tangible role that intermediaries, like we would say, can play in unlocking resources and expanding impact. We'll now move into a conversation with them. I'm going to ask them some questions to talk about their partnership with Miri USA and how it has supported the growth of their organizations. So going back to Miriam, we started with you first. The question is, before working with Miri USA, what was the specific moment or constraint that made you consider working with an intermediary to access or manage this funding? If you could also talk a bit about what were the primary barriers you were facing at the time, talking about compliance, the regulatory requirements, risk about money not being tax deductible, that would be helpful, and then after we can go over to follow up.
When we started, when I started setting up the organization, I had a number of friends in the USA who, when I sold my vision to them, they said, yes, would love to support you. And the first question they ask is, how do we send the money to you? And the next question, somebody said, yes, I would want to support you, but are you registered? Are you a 501c? And I was like, okay, I need to figure out what that is. And another ask, would I be able to get my tax rebates if I supported you as a charity? Are you able to send me a receipt? And I said, I don't think that is possible from Kenya. One of my biggest funders was very clear from the word go. She said, yes, we're going to support you, but we need you to be a 501c. And I said, unfortunately, so that initially I actually started looking how to register a 501c 501c in the US. And I immediately realized it was quite an uphill task, having to look for lawyers, having to look for a board in the US. There was a lot of paperwork that was required, which at the moment I was a one-woman team, because that's when I was shaping up the vision. So in the process, I talked to somebody and said, actually what you need to do is get a physical sponsor. And that's when I went online, started looking who are physical sponsors. And yes, I got so many of them. And that's when I realized, oh, okay, there's quite some work to be done. So most of the physical sponsors will ask you for several documents. One, are you registered? Do you have a bank account? Do you have proof that you're actually a charity organization in your country, and so on? So those are some of the barriers I faced initially, and that is what led me to work with Myriad.
Thank you so much for touching on that. And I love that you mentioned the barriers in terms of registration. I used to work at Food for Education in Kenya for a year, and the organization got so large to the point where they were able to establish their own 501c3 in the States, and I was responsible for managing the correspondence with lawyers. It was very exhausting. I'm like, I did not feel like doing this. If you want to fundraise all across the US, you need to register across all the different 50 states. And there are other annual tax forms that you need to file as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about the presentation that will follow, but I'd like to shift the conversation to Velma now to answer the same question. Before working with Myriad, what was the specific moment or constraint that made Builder consider working with an intermediary? And then maybe talk about what primary barriers you were facing at the time.
I think we shared similar story with Miriam in terms of reasons as to why we ended up working with Myriad. As I had mentioned in the introduction, Builder continued to grow, and we started attracting interest from international supporters, particularly in the USA. We encountered practical challenges, and several donors and foundations would want to support us but could not support us directly. For an organization that is based in Kenya, as I mentioned, talking about your story to your fundraising, and the next strategic question you get from a funder when you're almost closing, in terms of just getting them to understand your narrative and buy into your story, is, are you registered? Do you have a US 501c3 structure? So that kept on coming up as in the conversations, because we were just about to close and they really are interested. But then the next question is, are you registered here? And as we continue to face that barrier, we realized that we really need to come up with a mechanism around it. So before that, we had started the process of registering. And as you said, the process was quite tedious. My co-founder, my CEO and co-founder then realized that it would take it would be an administrative nightmare for us to get into that process while we're also building our organization and making sure that we are scaling at the rate that is aligned to our vision. So ideally, the challenge led us to explore the intermediary models, and we realized that it helped us in terms of just making sure that conversation was closed faster. And we were able to say, yes, we are not registered, but we have an intermediary, and most of them were very excited to work with us, considering we already have an established now intermediary.
Thank you so much for that response. And you also touched on a really important aspect. I think working with an intermediary and having a fiscal sponsor really allows a nonprofit organization to focus on the core mission of their work. If you do have a 501c3, it makes sense for a lot of organizations who are larger and have staff in the US and have people available to manage the compliance aspect. But if you have a very small team, you're kind of doing two things at once, like managing your relationships in the US, the compliance of having a 501c and the legal infrastructure there, as well as your core programming. So what we really like to say is that our American Friends Fund, our fiscal sponsorship structure, allows nonprofit organizations, especially smaller scale ones, to focus on what matters more, which is the impact that they're making in their respective communities. I know a lot of the discussions I've had with the nonprofits that I've met at this conference and at the booth, people have asked me, people have asked me what working with an intermediary does, but then they're also asking a lot of questions about like figuring out how do you know if an intermediary is the right fit. But it's really difficult to answer that question if you've never worked with one before. So thinking about like a smaller scale nonprofit that's getting into the philanthropic space, you need this legal entity. How do you know what to look for? What fees do you think are better? What fees would work with your organization in respect to the budget that you're currently operating with? Because Miriam and Velma have kind of navigated the system regarding the discussion in what made them search for an intermediary, it would be great to kind of understand your decision-making process around choosing Miriam USA. Maybe we could start with Velma. As you evaluated different options, what were the key elements you were searching for in an intermediary partner? And then also touching on what ultimately gave you the confidence to move forward with Miriam USA as your intermediary.
Well, at that particular point, for us, we really wanted to move fast in terms of removing the barriers. We were looking for an intermediary that had understood the narrative in Africa. We also were looking for an intermediary that was able to speak the same language as our donor, because in most cases you also need to be able to translate your narrative in a way that the intermediary is also able to understand exactly what you're doing. So that was also very critical for us, just to make sure that we got an intermediary who understood our language. And as I mentioned, we are in a mid space, so articulating the work we do was very critical for us. And we found that in Myriad, in terms of partnership, was easier for us to have our narrative at least well represented. Aside from that, I think it was also very important to make sure that in terms of registration as well and experience, that Myriad had that experience in terms of fiscal sponsorship. And our donors were also very keen to understand who particularly we were picking. And of course, some of them have understanding of fiscal sponsors, and they were able to redirect us to a few, and Myriad was on the lists, and therefore we just explored that, and here we are.
Thank you so much. You touched on other really great points that I really loved as well. Understanding the narrative. There are a lot of different intermediaries that exist, but you really want to go with one that understands the realities of the areas that you're working with. Philanthropy in the US, there are really many people that have lived experiences living and working in Africa, speaking African languages, engaging with African people on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes you'll see like some of the things that people say and think about Africa are very bizarre. So I think what makes Myriad USA great is that, at least on the Africa and the Middle East team, not only us, the entire organization as well, people who are leading the teams and working with the nonprofits in the respective regions have actual experiences living there, have family who come from those areas. My family's from Burkina Faso, and Kadi was born and raised in Guinea and then moved to the States. So having that cultural gap and understanding and awareness is very important, and it's something I urge anyone who's looking for an intermediary to consider. And then I also love that you mentioned the aspect of donors having more confidence once they know that an intermediary has worked with other nonprofits. So sometimes I'll join a call with a nonprofit and they're like, why should I trust you? Like, how do I know that you're reliable? We have an online database available that shows all the different nonprofit partners that we work with in certain regions. So let's say that I'm speaking to a nonprofit in Egypt. We have a portfolio there, but it's not very, very large. If I'm speaking with a new nonprofit who's also in Egypt, what I'll tell them, hey, I can connect you with another nonprofit that we've onboarded that works in Egypt, so you know that we're reliable. You can speak to them about your relationship with us, and having that shared understanding and like mutual trust really allows nonprofits to onboard with us from time to time. Shifting the same question to Miriam, maybe your point of view as you evaluated different intermediary partners. What were the key elements you were searching for, and then what made you feel confident enough to move with Myriad USA as your fiscal host?
I think for me, one of the things that moved me was the response time. So the very minute I started Googling and Myriad came up, a few others came up, and I wrote to several of them saying, we are in Kenya, we are new, I have a potential donor who is looking of a way to getting money to us. And Myriad was one of those that really got back to me very fast. And within no time, they asked for the document I sent, and in 3 weeks, we were set up and ready. And that made also my donor very happy because she's like, oh, I've actually worked with Myriad. There's another organization that we are sending money through Myriad to. And she said, I am very confident. It's a big organization, so I know my money is safe. So that gave me a lot of confidence. The other thing that I like about Myriad is that I have many friends, and it's because I work with an organization in the US called National Institute of Trial Advocacy, where we train public defenders all over the world. So I've met many US attorneys and judges who are my friends. And when I told them about my vision, they were like, yes, would love to support you. So they get to support me. I have people who send me $100 every month, others 40, others 50, and that has become our lifeline. You know, those individuals, donors who are able to send the little money, but it's actually monthly, and Myriad is able to process for them all the certificates they need, and they feel confident to send that money to us. So that has also given me a lot of confidence in my work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miriam. She's touching on our credit card donation platform that we have available to nonprofit partners. And what she mentioned is exactly right. Those monthly donations and recurring donations, especially even if it's like $5 from like 10 people on a monthly basis, can really go a long way. So being able to set that up is something very helpful and nice to consider when working with an intermediary partner. What platforms they allow you to be able to continue your fundraising. Another thing I wanted to shift on, I have a lot of calls with nonprofit partners who are interested in joining with Myriad, and one question that I get, especially from the smaller ones or the ones that are like mid-size, they ask me, what can working with an intermediary like Myriad USA do for my organization aside from handling compliance and due diligence? They're like, I'm going to pay fees, so why am I coming to you? Like, what am I going to get out of this relationship as opposed to like the emails and the back and forth? Again, I'd like to turn the question over to you both. In evaluating your relationship with Myriad USA, beyond the compliance and grant administration that we provide, where do you think that Myriad USA has added the most value to your organization? And I'll start with Miriam, and then I'll go to Velma.
For the value, one is just enabling us to be able to fundraise, especially with our friends in the US. That has given us a lot of confidence, and also supported our work because the work needs funding. So just having that vehicle where we can fundraise. Also, when we have like events, big events on the platform, you can actually put up an event where you ask your supporters to give, and you can do a campaign on it. And we did one of our campaigns, and we actually got some good funding through the platform. So you do the campaign, you put up your campaign, but you'll do the marketing for your campaign. So Myriad will not do the campaign for you. So you need to do the campaign. So we set up the campaign page on, it's called e-giving. Every.org. We put it up there, and then we sent it to our friends all over the world. And through that platform, we were able to get in funding for that particular campaign that we were doing. The other confidence is that our donors know that their money, there's somebody else watching over their money. So like our biggest donor, she says she doesn't have the time to come check whether we are doing the right thing and all that. And all she needs to get from Myriad is that, yes, they are compliant, you can send another donation. So for Myriad, we send, for every grant you receive through Myriad, you send them just an annual report, which you can also send to your donors, which gives us a lot of space to do the real work rather than just doing so many reports.
Thank you. And shifting the same question over to Velma, beyond compliance and grant administration, where do you think Myriad USA has added the most value to your organization?
I think I'll repeat this again. For us was the narrative shift. Being in the middle space between philanthropy and industry. the biggest contribution for us for Myriad was just helping us bridge the gap between the local reality and the philanthropic understanding. So I think the partnership provided legitimacy and trusted pathways that helped our donors who, at that particular point, and still I think up to now, don't have the time to constantly follow up on the narrative. So once you get the tax, certificate, most of them are happy to receive the annual reports, and that allowed us to just shift the conversation from a structure of donation to now impact work. So most of them are very keen to hear how our organization has been transitioning, and the more we share the narrative of how we're shifting and responding to the industry needs, the more we're getting also a lot of response in terms of increased support. Because one of the things that we realize in terms of fundraising is it's also very important to grow with your donor. And the more in terms of ensuring that the narrative continuously flows, the more you find that the donors are more interested in making sure that they grow with you as you're growing your system. Yeah, so I think that for us was our biggest shift.
Thank you. You mentioned another really significant phrase I'd like to mention. You said something about local reality versus philanthropic understanding, because those two can be very different from time to time. The reality that exists on the ground in a lot of African nonprofits, the work that they're doing, it doesn't translate well into philanthropy sometimes, and there's certain gaps there in terms of like reporting that a lot of intermediaries might ask for that certain African institutions might not have the capacity at the current moment to provide. So kind of building on that, could you talk a little bit more about the shift that has been in your relationships after working with Myriad? Particularly, what changed for your organization, specifically regarding how your relationships were like with existing funders once those compliance barriers were removed? And then maybe also talking about how the relationship with Myriad influenced your engagement with new donors or your ability to access new funding networks. I'll start with, who should I pick this time? Miriam, maybe, and then I'll go to Bella.
All right. So for the new donors, the fact that we already have a physical sponsor ready gives them a lot of confidence. So when we are doing our proposals, most of them will ask, do you have a physical sponsor? Or how do we send the money? And the fact that we already signed up with one and we have already received donation from the USA gives them that confidence. So it has made my work a bit easier when it comes to fundraising, that I already have a vehicle that will help bring the funds into the country. It also makes it easy for my friends out there to connect me with their friends. They just send the same link to their friends and say, I believe in this organization, I'm supporting them. So I have new individual donors coming in, people sometimes I don't know, who just log into my link on on my fund on Myriad and do the donation. So it has made work, the fundraising bit, quite easy for me.
Thank you. And Velma, same question. How has your relationship with existing funders changed after working with Myriad, and then how has the relationship influenced your engagement or perception of new donors or ability to access new funding networks?
We'll just go back to the reduced friction, yeah? Because once the understanding is there between the donor and the reality that you have a fiscal sponsor and our lived reality in terms of what we're doing here in Kenya, we realized that there was less time spent on the structure of giving, and there was more time spent on the impact of what we're doing with the system we're building in terms of workforce. So when donor understanding, for example, is addressed, then it gave us, it gives us peace and time to focus on our long-term strategy. And therefore, we're not busy running around back and forth trying to give the donor comfort over the legitimacy of the programs we're running. So for us, the reduction in friction in terms of the how still allows us to actually focus on the thing that is very important on the ground. which is delivering impact where it matters. And therefore, the donors at this particular point are very confident, even when we submit an additional, proposal and say we're moving towards this direction. There is a lot of confidence in the work we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for all the nice compliments that you've given to Myriad USA so far. Maybe while we focus a lot on what has been accomplished, I want to shift now to what still lies ahead. While organizations like Myriad USA have helped unlock access to U.S. philanthropy for smaller as well as larger locally led nonprofits, there's a larger structural challenge that still exists in philanthropy. Too many organizations with transformative solutions remain disconnected from the capital they need to scale their impact. Intermediaries may help bridge that gap, but we alone cannot close it. So with that broader understanding in mind, and recognizing that unfortunately Myriad USA is not able to provide fundraising support for organizations, I'd like to hear your honest and candid insights on the following question. In your honest opinion, where does the intermediary model still fall short? And what would need to change for it to fully support African-led nonprofits on their own terms? And I will start with Miriam there, and then we will shift to Velma.
I think one is that if you do not have contacts in the USA, then you do not have access to the funds. So as a physical sponsor, I know you do not connect us to the funds. We have to do the work, the footwork of getting the funders, the donors. And for you, you are a vehicle that, for Myriad, it's a vehicle that help us to get the money. So most of the grassroots organization, one of the issues I've seen is not one being registered or of having official documents. So for instance, when I was signing up, I was able to sign up with Myriad very fast because maybe because I'm a lawyer, so I knew all the technical things I needed. So I registered my organization, I had a certificate, I opened a bank account, and so on and so forth. So luckily I had that fund to do that bit, which came from my pocket. So most of the small organizations do not even have the fund to do the setup, the official setup, register that company, know where to register it, open a bank account. You need to put in a few dollars, a few shillings for the account to be open and to be there. So most of the grassroots will not have that. But I think to be ready, to be able even to access somebody like Myriad, you need all that. As I said again, if you do not have connections in the USA, if you do not have a funder who is waiting, I don't think then you want to open a fund with Myriad, because then nobody will come through that fund. However, we do have our portfolios on the Myriad. But rarely will you get a total stranger who just comes and funds you through the platform. So you need to have the connections, and that is maybe what Myriad and the other intermediaries need to help the small organizations on the ground to do. How do they make connections to the fund? Thank you.
Shifting to Velma, maybe your insights on that. Where are there still gaps, and how do you see closing those gaps?
Well, just to echo what Miriam has said, where intermediaries are very important in the cross-border giving ecosystem, they don't replace your work as a fundraiser, as a founder. You still have to do the work. So you still have to lead the narrative. You still have to shape the conversation when it comes to the donors. So it gives you a level of advantage because you still own your story. However, just as Miriam has said, sometimes it's a very delicate balance when you're fundraising and then redirecting the funds then to a system. I think the more we continue to explore how to adopt methods that work across giving, across the cross-border giving, I think we should be able to try and find out methodologies that would be able to support, especially local organizations that still do not have the exposure to the donation systems or philanthropic systems that are abroad. Aside from that, I think philanthropy needs to invest more consistently in organizational infrastructure. So sometimes you'll find one-off support, but sometimes the work requires a lot of work. So I think for it to be successful, we need to just find a platform to expose more of our work to these platforms. Sorry. And the broader lesson here is the goal should not simply be to move money from one continent to the other, but efficiently figuring out structures that would support even organizations that do not really have that visibility in these spaces. I think between the two of us, we are lived examples of just putting your story out there and making sure that you own your narrative consistently. And the more you interact with different organizations in different spaces and you're able to sell your narrative consistently, I think these opportunities come up, but then maybe intermediaries would create a structure that would allow those conversations to support those organizations that still do not have this visibility of such frameworks that are available for their fundraising.
Thank you so much, Mama and Miriam. That was extremely helpful. Your critiques are always helpful in helping Miriam and other philanthropic intermediaries grow and better support African nonprofits. I know we've been talking a lot about funds. Miriam was saying American Friends Fund fiscal sponsorship, and it's like, what does that even mean? So to put this discussion in practical terms, I invite you to review the PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to go through now for a clear understanding of how funds flow through Miriam was saying. I'll walk through our fiscal sponsorship model, what it looks like, what it does and what it does not do, and how organizations can utilize it to fundraise and engage donors in the U.S. to unlock capital towards their mission. So you see it, so let's stand up. Miriam and feel free to add in as you guys have engaged with the system. Any insights that you want to add in, just going on and pause. So yes, this is the presentation fundraising in the US that I present to nonprofits literally on a weekly basis. Sometimes I have 10 to 15 calls with like different nonprofits who want to open up a fund. So repeating the same information that I repeat on a daily basis, but excited to be doing it with you guys today. So Miriam USA facilitates thoughtful and effective giving across borders. We provide donors with a simple and efficient platform to support their nonprofit organizations overseas. And then with nonprofits, we work with them to offer a cost-effective solution to raise funds in the States. So this was a picture of like a snapshot of our outreach in 2025. We administered $195 million in grants to 1,075 nonprofits, sent out 1,517 grants to 103 countries. So a lot of work, a lot of work. Kadi and I, of course, are on the Africa and the Middle East portfolio. It's only two of us. So to Sub-Saharan Africa, we administered $24.7 million and 292 grants. And then to North Africa and the Middle East, we administered $5.1 million and 37 grants. I'd like to touch on Egypt a little bit more in the previous or coming slides because they do a really good job at unlocking diaspora funding, which is why they have administered so much, or we've been able to administer so much to North Africa and Middle East. But yeah, we also have funds in Europe, Latin America, the Caribbean, South Asia, East Africa, and the Pacific, and then North America as well. So 2024 U.S. charitable giving. We got this infographic or information from the Lilly School of Philanthropy, and we renew this kind of annually. So the 2025 data is not yet available, but when it is, we'll put it on this PowerPoint and send it to you guys if you guys would like it. One thing that a lot of people don't know or assume is that most of the giving in the U.S. is driven by individuals, which is why diaspora funding can be so catalytic. Once you get an individual to really commit to your mission, they can set up like recurring donations. And as you can see kind of on the PowerPoint presentation, 66%
of 2024 U.S. charitable giving was given by individual people. People give for all different kinds of reasons. Again, I mentioned there was this guy at our organization who did Peace Corps in Burkina Faso, and like before the country gained its independence, and he's like, oh my God, I love the country, I love its people, I need to continue giving there. So he set up a fund at Myriad, and he continues donating to the country on a year-to-year basis. Sometimes people give because they're like, oh, I studied abroad in this place, I love these people, like I just need to continue giving to them. Other times people are like, this organization has, or this country has like a cultural museum or institution that I'm very passionate about, I'd love to give to. So people give for all different kinds of reasons, literally any and everything for humanitarian crises, disasters, etc. as well. 19% of giving is by foundations, 8% of giving is by request, and then 7% is given by corporations, which is not really what people would expect, but it's very interesting to see these totals outlined on this graph. The reasons why people give, a lot of different reasons. Generous tax incentives are really drives philanthropy in the US, but then, like I mentioned, people might be passionate about a cause, but then in the US, there's generous tax systems that exist. When you donate to a nonprofit organization and through Myriad USA's platform, your donation is considered tax exempt. So when you're going to like file your taxes on a year-to-year basis, you can claim benefits from that. So that is something that a lot of donors in the US really like. That's why they're like, oh, are you a 501c3? Are you legally registered here in the States? Because when they donate, they can get a tax receipt and then they get benefits from that. And Myriad USA is able to administer all of that on the back end. Donors come to us, they give us a donation for, let's say, Justice Nest or Builder, and then we automatically send them that receipt. So generous tax incentives is a huge reason why people give in the US, as well as the other reasons I mentioned before. People can also give in a lot of different methods. So people can give through like cash. People come into our office and like give checks, like, oh, $2,000 because I love this country or I love this organization. People can also give through other methods as well. We accept cash-based assets as well as non-cash-based assets as well. So gifts of publicly traded securities. We get gifts of life insurance and retirement plan assets, so people can give from like their 401k accounts to an organization they're passionate about. Bequests, like people who own real estate, they can give through there as well. Stocks, donations. People also can like do gifts of artworks, which our Myriad art team handles. Very complex, but that's also a possibility that is out there. So yeah, a lot of different mechanisms that people give for all different kinds of reasons in the US and everywhere in the world, of course. In terms of nonprofits who want to fundraise in the US, you really have two different options. So the first one is creating your own US public charity, which is a process that I said that I did for Food for Education that really stressed me out. It's not an easy process. First, you have to incorporate under state law with organizing documents, organizational bylaws, of course. You need to apply for a 501c tax exempt status with the IRS. And then you need to register with state charity offices for charitable solicitation. So you need to register with an individual state, and then if you want to fundraise across all of the US, all the 50 states, you need to make sure that you're registering across the entire country as well. In terms of operational considerations, the majority of your board needs to be independent, needs to exert full discretion and control, no conduit, so you need to prove that like funds aren't just like passing through your account, that wherever the funds are, there's like due diligence being done on the back end. Even when you set up your 501c3, you need to pass what's called a public support test to fully classify as a public charity, right? So sometimes people, let's say they have a fiscal sponsorship fund with Myriad USA, and then they grow large enough and they're like, hey, we want to open up our own 501c3. We don't recommend them to automatically close down their fund because you still need to pass the public support test to show that a certain percentage of the money that's coming into your account is like public money. So even after you set up that account, there are still other additional barriers that you need to go through in order to maintain your status. You also need to do ongoing filing requirements. There's the IRS Form 990 and then state filings as well. The Form 990, you need to tell the IRS what you're doing with the money. So
you need to file that annually, as well as do state filings for wherever you are incorporated. The estimated annual operating costs are about $25,000 per year, and then you also should be hiring lawyers to deal with the due diligence, compliance, additional complexity that might not be considered. So yes, this is option 1. Option 2, you can partner with an existing 501c3 who will serve as your fiscal sponsor. So that is what Myriad USA does. You can partner with us, and then we will serve as your fiscal sponsor. And what that basically means, and what the advantages are, is that there's no need to incorporate or apply for federal tax exemption. Myriad USA is serving as your 501c3 or your legal entity in the US. When you have, or you're working with an intermediary, there's no need for a board with formal board proceedings. You don't need to do the annual tax filings because Myriad USA handles all that on your behalf. You don't need to deal with the public support test, and then we take care of like giving the donors all the tax receipts that they may ask for, etc. So in terms of a lot of administrative work, you won't need to consider that when you're working with a 501c3. You don't need to give us reports to kind of let us know what you're doing with your money. It's not just because we want to collect your information. We have auditors who come to us and they're asking us where our money is going, so we need to be able to track that down. But you won't have to deal with that process. We're handling that as your intermediary. Choosing an intermediary, we talked on this briefly. You want to pick one that fits with your geographic or issue focus. Myriad USA has nonprofits that work across all different sectors, like cultural institutions, museums, criminal, like justice nonprofits, climate change, literally any kind of nonprofit I think we have on the books and on the record. We have a track record, reputation, and image, right? So, like we kind of mentioned in the panel discussion that we just had, if you tell people that you're working with Myriad, they'll see the other nonprofits that we're working with, and it builds more trust with donors. We have a set fee structure that's available that's also helpful, and it's cheaper than opening up your own entity. And then we have a breadth of services and quality interaction with the staff, which I hope that Miriam and Velma can attest to, that they've been experiencing with Myriad USA. We really try to be there for our nonprofits, build one-on-one and personal relationships with them. And we really see the relationship as one of like support and growth, and really try our best not to be transactional. So yes, thinking of all these options when you're choosing which intermediary or fiscal host you'd like to go. Weighing your option, yes. So this is basically everything that I just said, and that on about on a chart. Setting up your own 501c3, the startup time, the cost, administrative requirements, benefits, and maybe when you should engage with each method. I also want to mention that I'm not telling people they don't get a 501c3. I do think it makes the more sense when your organization is like bigger, fully established, you have someone physically present in the US. That's what happened at Food for Education. They blew up, got really big, and they had someone physically working in the US to help them with all these findings. So if it's something that you want to consider down the line, of course, your USA is kind of happy to support you, not with setting up the 501c3 because we don't do that, but support you emotionally, let me say that. But then in terms of, working with a fiscal sponsor, the setup time is about 4 to 6 weeks to open up a fund. There is a one-time setup fee, but this is something that please don't be too scared about it. Like for a lot of smaller nonprofits who show that they have like a funding pipeline available, they have someone that's very ready and willing to give to them. We are able to make exceptions, so please don't be too scared about that. We have simple grant requests, so if you're requesting money from the fund, we need requests. You need to tell us how much money you're requesting, where the money is going, and we need to make sure the activities are charitable because the IRS is going to come knocking on our door and nobody wants to get in trouble with the IRS. So yes, that's all I'm asking for that information. And then, benefits, and then we should engage. Smaller nonprofits, mid-size, you might not have this team of groups. Setting up an American Friends Fund. So this is a fiscal sponsorship solution that we have been talking about over and over and over again. It's what Justice Ness and Bill Turr both have at Myriad USA. You can title your fund whatever you would like. But the general name is kind of called an American Friends Fund. We work with a dedicated fund manager or with regional expertise and knowledge of regulation when we're opening up a fund. So for all of our African and Middle East nonprofits, it's Kadi, Salat, and I who handle all of that. We are the dedicated fund managers. If there's a nonprofit that is legally incorporated in Europe, there's a Europe team for that. In Asia, there's an Asian team for that. In Canada, there's a Canadian team for that. So we work with a very specific team. We really understand your journey, the work of your nonprofit, etc., which is really helpful. One thing that we provide that's really helpful to nonprofit organizations, it says customize your donation page and launch fundraisers, right? We have this online giving page that we was referring to, which is called every.org. A lot of nonprofits, all of our nonprofits actually use this as like a credit card platform to get smaller and recurring donations, which is really helpful. So like Maria mentioned, that once you have the link to that, you can share it to your donors who are anywhere in the world. We can only give the US donors those tax kind of receipts that anyone in the world can donate to your organization on that platform. And there are a lot of different giving mechanisms available there. So people can set it up through like card, through donor advice funds, through securities, etc. And then they can give like one-time or recurring, which is really helpful. With the recurring ones, you won't have to worry about it because they'll just come out of their bank accounts. And organizations are free to share this link as they would see fit. Like Miriam mentioned, sometimes people use it to like, for different activities that they're doing. Sometimes people do like humanitarian campaigns that they're working on. The organization in Egypt did like a Ramadan campaign that they're working on. We share the link with your donors and then they can easily contribute. I always like to say this is for smaller donations though. Maybe you would say we're physically located in New York, so people can like physically come in and give checks to our organization. Like I mentioned, people will come in with like checks to donate to the nonprofit partners that we have. And then, people are giving checks, people can donate directly to our bank account, and all of our details are posted online, which is really helpful. We have our bank information there, all of the information about giving stock donations, etc. So, very transparent in the information that we provide. What else? We have the option to enlist on the levy for corporate employee giving. So this is something that a lot of people are unfamiliar with, I think sometimes. A lot of big corporate entities in the US, like Microsoft or Salesforce, they have like corporate giving programs. So what people or nonprofits who are looking to fundraise, what they'll do is that they'll find, let's say that they're from Ivory Coast. They'll find somebody who's from Ivory Coast and that is working at Microsoft, because that's like an employee matching thing that they kind of do, where like if an employee is able to raise a certain amount, then the organization like Microsoft or Salesforce will match that amount as well. And Mary was able to kind of handle all of that administratively on the back end, which is another benefit that comes from working with us. We're located in New York, and we offer our office space free of charge to our nonprofit partners. So people come to conferences, and we can offer our office space for them to use for meetings. Sometimes people have like small intimate donor events that they want to host at our office. Someone has hosted like a board meeting. So yeah, office space is completely available to our partners, which is helpful because New York City is very, very expensive. And then we have access to training programs on fundraising, a bunch of different webinars that we provide. I recently just did one a month ago about like philanthropic deserts in West Africa, how to enable more philanthropic capitals and nonprofits in West Africa, because it doesn't really get a lot of funding. Oh my God, so much work. I'm almost going to get time for questions. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. But in terms of how charitable funds move through Myriad USA, the first thing is opening up your American Friends Fund. That takes 4 to 5 weeks. Like Myriad mentioned, we would take your documents that we have to prove to the US government, the US IRS, that you're the equivalent of a nonprofit, wherever you are, so we would get relevant financial statements, information about your board and senior management. We would also get your registration documents and relevant tax filings, get all of that in an online complete application, do the due diligence, and then open up your American Friends Fund. Once it's open, you can start receiving donations into it. After the fund is open, like I mentioned, donors can contribute, and we give the donors a tax-exempt receipt. We can only give that to US taxpayers. After that, the nonprofit receives a notification in their portal that funds are actually available. So you'll get like a ding on your email and tell you, hey, you got this much money from this donor, and then you can actually request those funds. The nonprofit logs into the portal and puts in a grant request. So when you want the money from your fund, you need to put in a request, let us know what the activities are being used for, and then providing us updated information about your nonprofit registrations, financials on a yearly basis, as well as banking information. And Myriad USA reviews and disperses the fund within 3 weeks. So this is the full cycle. Let me go through here. This is a small snapshot of our network. We currently have 1,789 open funds, so 24% in the African Middle East, and over 1,700 active funds. Here are some of our nonprofit partners around the globe. I put the African and Middle East ones here so people have an idea of who we currently work with, and there's a credit card page as well online, every.org. You can type in every.org Myriad USA, you'll see all the different nonprofits that we work with, and you can filter based off of your country of interest. What makes us different? I'll go quickly through this. A broad portfolio of services, so we do American Friends Fund, funds for like donors as well. We also set up legacy funds, so that let's say that someone is very passionate about like a mission or a country, and they're sadly about to no longer physically be present in this world, they can set up an infrastructure where even after they're not here, money goes towards something they're very passionate about. A like-minded partner, a global diverse platform, a lot of learning and spotlighting opportunities. So what we like to do for a lot of our nonprofit partners, even though we cannot help fundraise, we try to spotlight their work. For example, we brought in Miriam and Velma to be here, talking a little bit more about their organization, etc., giving access to our office space, and really working through our nonprofits throughout the entire journey of their experience or nonprofit work. And then local expertise and staff language fluency. So a lot of our staff are fluent in multiple African, Middle Eastern, not Middle Eastern, Spanish, what else? European languages as well, French. You don't really see that in the philanthropic sector. Jula, Susu, so those are really important things to consider. So that allow you to connect more one-on-one with the people who are administering grants. Competitive fee structure. This is the fee for the American Friends Fund. We look at a fund within a calendar year. So looking at what an organization gets from January to December of the year, like let's say 2026, we charge 5% of the first 100,000, 3% of the next 400,000, 1% of the next 500,000, and 0.5% of total contributions received in excess of $1 million. So the more money that organizations raise in the fund, the less fees are deducted. We don't charge an annual maintenance fee, and there's no minimum balance requirement. So there's no money coming into the fund. We're not taking money from you. It is important to consider that if no funds are received within the actual account within 3 years, we need to shut it down and renew the agreement. So we really try to make sure that there's an established donor pipeline for the nonprofits to move into the fund. The last thing I will touch on is the Myriad Alliance for Borderless Giving. Like I mentioned, we can only give tax receipts to U.S. taxpayers, right? But we're a part of this broader network that is called the Myriad Alliance, which is a like-minded network of sister entities that exist in other places to enable nonprofits that we work with to tap into the other market as well. So let's say, I don't know, Senegalese nonprofit opens up an American Friends Fund with Myriad USA. They're like, oh, there are no Senegalese people living in the US. I want to be able to have them donate to us in Senegal and get those tax incentives. They come work with Myriad USA. But then there are also Senegalese people in Canada. So they're like, I want to open up the same structure for the Senegalese people who are living in Canada to donate to our nonprofit. Myriad USA is a part of this network, so we can share the due diligence documents so that we can get similar funds within these respective regions. They're all operating within the grant-making laws of wherever they are currently located in, so the regulations aren't exactly the same. But in terms of being able to access someone on email, that is something that we can facilitate very easily, and we share the due diligence documents on file. Last slide. So thank you guys so much. I know that was a very lengthy kind of presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to pause here for questions. This is my information as well as Khalid's information. I'm going to pause here for questions for me or Miriam or Velma. before we go into our interactive kind of session if we have time for that. So yes, any questions, comments, concerns, or anything else?
So my question is to Justice Nest. I want to ask you, mentioned that you help the women to get out from the prison and take care of their children. My question is, most of those women and their children face the mental health issues because of the situation. How do you with those mental health issues? Do you have that program that help them to heal? Thank you.
You can pass it on to the gentleman behind you. In the meantime, we can listen here.
Thank you very much. This is Ariel from Ethiopia. As you all know, currently there's a lot of dynamics. Even at times it has made our prediction to fail. Even our strategies are failing because so much is changing. At times our past knowledge, experience may not be adequate enough to solve today's realities. This is what's happening. This is what we are heading. It recalls me, one person has said, like trying to solve the 21st century problems, maybe with the 20th century methodologies, may not work. When I think of what's happening in the last 5 years or 3 years, the change on every day. So I really appreciate what has been presented. But in order to be really pragmatic, we are here actually to follow the money. What's happening? Is our past knowledge practice, is that really helping? So in light of that, we see a crisis here and there. A crisis in one section, the leadership, will affect the development section. We are in the middle of turmoil. That's what I feel. So, given that, what are the advice that you can give us?
Right.
Can we really make an intelligent guess about the future?
Yeah.
So I think you have got the gist of my question.
Yeah. Thank you. And so we have 2 more, and then we'll give you to speak. So I'll be bringing your mic.
Hi, Habi.
Hello. Guys, the practice of speaking to mics means you be louder. She can't hear. She's saying she can't hear. So if you're asking a question, be louder, give it volume and mass.
Okay. Hi, Habi. My name is Dennis Pato from Vijana Corps, Uganda.
Oh, hi.
Hi, we've met everywhere except physically.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah.
Communicate via email.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions for you. One, when you presented the slide on your network of alliances, my mind went back to your point earlier that the every.org link works globally. So I just need a bit more clarity on why you would have to share our due diligence documents with your alliances in Australia or Canada or the rest of them. In other words, why can't the same link work without having to do additional paperwork? That's one. 2, in a country like Uganda, where regressive draconian laws are making it all the more difficult for non-profit organizations and other entities by placing additional layers of restrictive compliance requirements, do you have, or are you planning to add perhaps additional layers that would make it easier for non-profits to still receive funds safely and of course legally?
Thank you. And then the final one here, and then we'll get an answer and your reflections, maybe.
Thank you, Happy. My name is Florence Annan. I work with Amnesty International Kenya. Just clarity on part of your presentation. One is just adding to what a gentleman said. To what extent, because it was not so clear, if we are partnering with you, to what extent can we do joint fundraising activities, or is it that that's the mandate of the partner that is partnering with you? So just give a bit of clarity really on that. Then secondly, with the other platforms and with the other platforms that you have within Australia and the other, do we still have to pay extra charges to access those markets, or is it part of the application charges that we are going to have with you?
All right. So you have a buffet of questions. You can engage us, and let me throw you off a little. You've replaced the American people in the sense USAID was, it always had, USAID always had that nice logo. Now that we remember our dearly beloved, the late great USAID, and the tagline was, from the American people. You've been doing, you mentioned here that sort of individuals are the bigger share of the ones who contribute. Of course, you're not replacing USAID whatsoever, but are there lessons that the closure of USAID brought to you that you're carrying forward as you continue with that? So we'll hear your reflections. If either of your colleagues wants to reflect. Yes, yes, sure.
All right. I think mine was very direct. It's on the mental health of the women and children that we work with. So as I said, we have a social department team. They are trained on counseling. So that is the first layer of mental health that they get to receive. And then we work with partners. So for instance, our clients who have gone through GBV, we work with Wangu Kanja Foundation, which offers that service to our clients. So it depends with what kind of support they need. If, for instance, the mental health has gone to the issues of drug use, drug abuse, then we get a rehabilitation center that is able to handle that particular. That said, one of my big projects that I am aiming to do is to open a mental health hub within the prison, because what we have experienced so far is that by the time we are getting to see our clients, either they come already traumatized, or just even the process of being arrested and getting into prison, the trauma gets really bad. One of our clients literally passed on. She got in with very mild, almost, with no sickness. And then because of the shock of being in prison, and because she had not committed that particular crime, she developed depression. And within no time, like within 4 months, we lost her to depression. So yes, the requirement or the need for mental health is huge in prisons. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. I'll try to answer the questions that I received. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go to yours last. I really cannot hear on that stage, I'm so sorry. But I'll come back to you last. Maybe I'll start with Dennis. You mentioned something about the every.org link working globally, but why do we have to share your due diligence documents or all the other entities? So I think I was maybe a bit confusing. So the every.org link that I talked about on the credit card platform, that is a platform that we give to nonprofit partners to drive their own fundraising, right? So once you onboard with Myriad USA, you have that link and you can use that to post up different campaigns that you have, different initiatives, post up different fundraising targets, and then you're sharing that link with your donors so that they can donate to your organization if they want to give smaller or recurring donations. The reason why, that is separate from opening up the American Friends Fund. That's the platform that you use to drive your fundraising. In terms of why you have to share your, or open up funds in all the other areas that are part of the Myriad Alliance, is because they have their own grant-making laws. So Myriad Australia is operating within the grant-making laws in Australia. Myriad Canada, they're doing the laws that are in Canada. The entity in Belgium, they're following Belgian laws. So we can't necessarily take what exists in the US and then tell other people, you have to implement this where you are, because they're their own countries, they have their own structures in place. So that is really the reason why. It's an alliance, so we try to work together as much as possible to streamline the process, but at the end of the day, every country kind of has its own regulations that people have to follow. So what makes it easier is that you will open up a fund with Myriad USA. You won't have to reshare your due diligence documents. We will share it to the people who are wherever they're operating and tell them, hey, we've worked with this organization, we've given them grants, we have their due diligence documents on file, so it streamlines and it makes the process really easier. In terms of the question that you asked about Uganda, that is a very, very good question. There are a lot of new laws that have been impacting a lot of the nonprofit partners there. And you are right, it doesn't make sense for intermediaries to kind of hound these nonprofits and telling them submit it, report it. if you're not probably going to be able to receive money to like drive your impact forward. So we are very sensitive to that fact. For a lot of the nonprofit partners we've been working with in Uganda, they've just been requesting a lot of money like in bulk. And what we've done to facilitate and make the process easier, we have not required them to submit in the actual request. We will handle that on the back end for them because we know that there's so much going on and that money needs to leave automatically. We've also been decreasing the timeline that we set up funds. So like we usually take about 3 to 4 weeks, but for emergencies, which what's happening in Uganda is an emergency, we are working on setting up funds every week. So even like while Kali was here, like yesterday, she facilitated like payments to go out. Today is Thursday, yeah, payments to go out Wednesday, like multiple of them for partners in Uganda. So that's something that we try to do, like remove the administrative burdens that might lie ahead. Like let's say the reporting time comes along, I would like communicate with people on WhatsApp, tell them, hey, can you send me this, like, I don't know, brief annual report, and we can upload it on the back end. So that's one option that's available there. In terms of what additional avenues that Myriad USA is taking to work on that, we have been meeting with our lawyers to kind of see what options are available. We also have been seeing a lot of nonprofits in Uganda open up entities elsewhere. So like using like their Kenya entity, so funds can flow into there. So I think that's something important to consider for nonprofits. If you're ever in a situation like what is currently occurring in Uganda, maybe having a base elsewhere you can like receive funds in another area so that your organization is just not closed down automatically because of these huge shifts. So we are trying the best. We're not perfect, but currently meeting with legal counsel to see what options are available for nonprofit partners. Someone else asked a question, to what extent partnering with Myriad USA can you do joint fundraising activities? That's another good question. So we always like to say we don't fundraise on behalf of nonprofits, but it's not that like if you come to us with like a question, we're gonna say, oh no, we can't help you with that. Like we try to be as helpful as we can. Maybe an example that I can give, let's say that you wanna convene a small group of donors in New York for UNGA week, right? We can offer our office space, cater lunch, that's something that we can do. And then you would have to kind of maybe set the theme, not maybe, you would have to set the theme of like what the activity will be like, maybe your contacts, who you're going to invite. What Myriad USA can do is kind of try to see who's in our networks and send additional invites as well. So that's something that we can try to do. Let's say that, I'm trying to think of fundraising stuff is something that we post in our social media activities. It's not, we don't really do that too often, but yeah, maybe giving the office space, trying to see if we can cater lunch, and then maybe adding on our other networks who might be interested. We also do a lot of connections, not necessarily with donors, because we're not able to do that, but like with like-minded partners. So like if there are other nonprofits doing their same work, you might want to connect with, that's a process that we can facilitate as well. So I would say that's the kind of help that we provide. And in terms of the setup fee for all the different entities, that is something I really need more clarity on that, honestly, because I've been figuring it out internally. I believe that if you already have a fund open with Myriad USA, like one entity, the fees for the entities will be decreased. But I will follow up on that and get back with you. You can share your email with me. I think that would be great. But yeah, you do have to share, or the nonprofit regulations and all the other different areas aren't the same. So unfortunately, we will have to maybe do additional requirements, but we can share your due diligence over to the people who are in the other entities. The last question about Myriad USA not replacing USA and lessons that maybe I've seen on the back end, it would be to really invest in, I think, diaspora communities. I think some organizations like USA left and they really don't care because they just have done such an amazing job with fundraising individually. There's this one organization I would recommend you all to check out. They're in Egypt. They're called Versal Foundation. And most of the money that they get comes from the Egyptian diaspora. So the lady, the founder, she went to school in Oxford. She has Egyptian friends who are there. And they, oh my God, like the credit card platform, I get notifications almost every day. Somebody's giving like $50 to their organization, 25. They'll have Ramadan drives and people will give like, oh my God, there was this one time I saw that multiple people giving like $10,000 to their organization like around the same time. And I think it's because they've done such a good job at investing in their diaspora communities, interacting them, engaging with them, There's this other nonprofit that I interact with. They're called Foundation for Healthier Senegal, located in Senegal, and they've done a really good job at, they have this thing called Full Send Ambassadors. So they're Senegalese, and there's a huge Senegalese population in New York City. So what they actually do is that they get those Senegalese diaspora to help like fundraise for them, like through like social media posts or through connecting them with their network. So I would say with the closing of USA, it's definitely very unfortunate, but investment in people, investment in individuals, and investment in diaspora can take nonprofit organizations in Africa a very long way. So I definitely think those strategies are something that are helpful for nonprofits to consider. And somebody mentioned something about the world going into turmoil, what can we do? I don't know that I have the best answer for that. I'm still learning myself. It's a very difficult world to be in, so honestly, I just like leave it up to God. I pray and try to be a good person and see where you can take things one day at a time. But maybe let's talk individually, because maybe I didn't understand the question that well. And you are going to please have to give you the mic, because I couldn't hear you.
No problem. Actually, that's what part of it partially. I was asking if, let's say, fundraising efforts, you come across a call for proposal from US by one of the US charities, but require you have either the 501c or a fiscal sponsor. Can I just send an email and then I tell you there's this call, can we go together? Or probably I'm even in negotiations with the UK charity, and then they indicate the issue of the 501c. Do I have to pay, okay, I know the due diligence you still do, but do I have to open the fund with you, or can you just do the due diligence, then if we get the funds, we agree on the management fee?
That's a good question, because a lot of people have blown up my inbox asking about that. You have to go through due diligence, right? So in order for us to meet these service with the school sponsor, we need to have like all the compliance in place, so we need to open up the fund. And in terms of the setup fee, that's $1,500. What we do is that, let's say there's an organization that's developing active networks in the US, and they have a donor that's like, oh, hey, I'm going to donate $20,000 to you, but I need you to have a fiscal sponsor. We can proceed with opening up the fund. So we are able to do that. Sometimes people are like, oh, I get $10,000 monthly, but you need to have a fiscal sponsor. We can work on that. For proposals, for general call for proposals, they're not able to do that, but let's say that you receive a personal invitation, which fingers crossed you'll get from, like, let's say, Word Foundation, and they're like, oh, we really want to fund you, but we need you to have like a fiscal sponsor, and they send you a direct proposal or invitation to apply to a grant. You can feel free to reach out to us, and we'll see what we can do. So we try to be flexible, but there are certain policies that are in place. So yes, I hope that answers the question, but if it didn't, please send me an email.
Any other question?
Sage, looks like that's a question.
All right, so we'll take three more, just three more. We are mindful of time, but we also want to ensure that we can leave enough time at the end of this, maybe after the set of questions, for just one-on-one engagements and interactions through the evening over coffee here, and a lot more of what she can share. If you're able to get her one-on-one, it would be best, as well as the colleagues. A fun fact about Habi is that she probably would be a rapper if she wasn't doing what she's doing. Can you hear how fast she talks? Yeah? Wow, you're rapping, but it's nice. It's music to our ears. So, all right, one, and a final one. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Sergio Dakaza. I am the Managing Director of Student Entrepreneurs Academy.
Closer to the mic.
My name is Sergio Dakaza. I am the Managing Director of Student Entrepreneurs Academy. We operate as an incubation hub for supporting startups in Uganda, Rwanda, and DRC. I wanted to, my question is based on my brother Davis. I wanted to ask, when you open a Million Account USA, it means you are affiliated to Million Account USA as an NGO from Africa. And then you make due diligence also to open another one in, let's say, in Canada. But the challenge with African NGOs is they have to comply everything locally. So they have to make sure that they comply with the Myriad USA requirement and the Myriad USA Canada, and also Myriad Canada. But the question is, when it comes now to integration, like advertisement, because some organizations they may not be having direct connections with funders, but they choose the way of advertising directly on social media and other platforms. Is it the two things integrated, or the NGOs have to advertise separately for those two regions?
Before you answer, maybe just speak all three so that it's one collective.
Okay, thank you.
Closer.
Okay, thank you, Habi. My name is Fatuma Wamala, Kukuza Education, Executive Director from Uganda. I'm glad to meet you because we're just new with Myriad. My question is whether you have induction sessions for new members with Myriad, because you just don't want to have opportunity and you don't tap into it, you don't use it because you do not know how to go about it, or you don't even know it exists. Yeah, thank you.
That's a good one. And then the very final question of the evening. The lady in green. Oh, you have no mic? Sorry, here is a mic.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for the presentation. I mentioned something earlier, and it's still not really clear to me. So you said something, I noted it down.
Quote unquote.
So you said, okay, when most organizations get the fund, you grant, they would have to apply as a grant. So I don't know how that works. So when a donor donates through the platform, the recipient or the organization would apply. Okay, so how does the reporting, I think that's still my concern. So if the donor is giving you this amount, and he's expecting that amount, you've given a budget, this is what I want to do with this $10,000 you're giving to me, and then it goes through your platform, and the final amount that gets to the organization is, for example, 9.5. How do have you experienced, or have you had instances where there has to be a report, and how did that happen if you've had that kind of instance?
All right, you have your set of 3 questions, and use the chance to also close. Yeah.
Maybe I'll let you guys close.
All right.
So maybe I'll start with the one that was the easiest for me. Your question. Induction sessions for new members. We have onboarding calls before people open up a fund, but we don't have that. But it's not that we won't do it. So if you reach out and say, hey, I'm going to understand how to use the fund, can you please hop on a call with me? We are always happy to do that. Like 30 minutes talking through what the different databases look like, what are opportunities that are out there. So I'm very happy to set that up. Feel free to reach out to me via email. And I love the idea about induction sessions, so I'm definitely going to bring it up and make it seem like it was my idea when I get back to work. So thank you so much. Always feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the fund. I always feel it's very responsive. More questions. I think it was the second business meeting that I had to do. In terms of reporting, that's a very good question in terms of, okay, if someone gives a certain amount, but then there's like a fee associated, right? So what people usually like to do in the beginning, they'll tell the donor, hey, Myriad USA charges a fee. And a lot of the times the donor will be able to send an additional amount to cover the fee, so that we're giving the nonprofit organization the full amount that they should get. So that is usually kind of how we offset that. And then maybe in terms of how we use the system, you were completely correct. So basically, let's say somebody sends $10,000, right? It will go to Myriad USA. We will take out our relevant fees. We have a portal where the nonprofit can see all the fees that are charged, and then put it in the nonprofit's portal, and then they can actually request that amount. So they'll see the fees charged and then request. In terms of reporting, that's another easy question. Sometimes individual donors will give money, but they don't really require a report. So that's not something that nonprofits worry about too much, but let's say that you get a grant from like Cuba, right? And Cuba has a report, and they're like, they want this money to be used for X, Y, and Z. You will be responsible for, let's say, submitting that individual report to Cuba. You have to do that like on your own. And then basically whatever Cuba told you the money should be used for, you should be putting that in your grant request when you're requesting it from your USA. So copying over the same information. This money is for a Cuban grant to do X, Y, and Z. For the budget line items, you match it up to whatever you're providing with Cuba, and then we'll look at it to see like, if it matches, and then we'll just transfer the money out. But in terms of like the fee, honestly, I think communicating with the donors beforehand, letting them know, hey, maybe in terms of the fee, is there any way that you're able to top this up? Or if not, I don't think it's too big of a deal because a lot of institutions know that people work with intermediaries and intermediaries charge a fee. So that even though they'll have like, that they, let's say they got 9,800 and the 200 intermediate, they can just, we have a report that we follow up on, and then usually nonprofits tell that to like, their grant makers who understand the system. So that's not too much of a issue that's how I've heard before. Stage, in terms of your question, in terms of Myriad Canada and Myriad USA, and about visibility, that's another really good question. I don't know that I have a full answer to that, but are right. I think that the issue is that like, we are part of the alliance, but the regulations are different. In terms of like visibility for like different ones, your links that you get from Myriad Canada will be separate than the links that you get from Myriad USA. It will be two completely different ones. In terms of any advertisement, Myriad Canada will advertise in a separate way than Myriad USA might because the teams are different, the infrastructure internally is different. So yeah, maybe I think we should also set up some time to talk more specifically about what we're referring to so I can provide more personalized one-on-one support. But yeah, all of the same things we can share the due diligence, but the internal workings are different. I tried to answer the question the best that I can. I'm trying, but I will, it's nice to meet you all. Thank you guys so much for staying this long, and it was very long. I would like to hand over the floor to Miriam and let's begin your closing remarks.
Yes, please. Yes, please. We are intentional about leaving a bit of time for you to be able to engage. So immediately after this, I don't want to have to come back. This will be the announcements that are important. We'll just take a group photo after we are done, after you two are done. And then we'll be back here at 7:30 for dinner. Dinner tonight is hosted courtesy of HERI Africa. And HERI is the Hanasi in Education Research for Impact in Africa. They have a very good plan for the evening that they encourage you to dress in your African wear and join this as potentially maybe the final evening, because some of you tomorrow will probably want to go out in the evening, even if you're traveling on Saturday. So there'll still be dinner tomorrow though, but we're just saying, for tonight, let's come back at 7:30 here, ready to bond with one another and to engage in some light touch conversations. Back to you, Miriam.
Thank you. Maybe to say thank you to Myriad for being our enabler and having us here. To the East African Philanthropy Network also for having us here. Maybe a call that, yes, join this Justice Nest fight so that we fight for the rights of others, to reduce the people in prisons, and to offer children to have their families at home. So if you are from Kenya and you work with women, I'm inviting you to reach out so that we see whether we can connect some of our clients, what you offer, the services you offer. If you have somebody in prison, reach out to me, we see how we get them out. Thank you.
All right. Do you have some closing remarks as well?
Well, thank you very much, Myriad. Thank you very much to everyone who's here. I do believe that we're all doing honest and impactful work trying to support the community that we are working with. I think it's also very important to recognize all of you because we really doing a great job in terms of also fundraising. So one of the key takeaways I feel like we need to also appreciate in this particular space is let's consider the opportunities that are around us and the opportunities to collaborate in terms of figuring out how to do fundraising so that we're able to deliver the impact. As a continent, we really do require to move the needle for the next generation.
as it has been mentioned, we are really the ancestors, and we really have to shape that narrative. We should be able to answer the question of, did you really do the best when it came to mobilizing resources to deliver the impact that is required for you? Why I'm saying this is, as I stand here, I'm representing a group of women who are carrying cement bags down in the training center. They're painting rooms, they are sanding furniture. I would like us to appreciate that for every furniture you sit in, for every room you're in, remember that there's a tradesperson who has put in their, hard-earned efforts in trying to just put themselves to that particular position. I would like to also appreciate the funders, the grant makers, the ones who ensure that we're able to do this work. Please note that we do know that the narrative around Africa is still difficult, and I do understand Myriad is also trying to make sure that that narrative shifts. We know that Europe is still receiving more funds than we should, that we are, but also it's an opportunity for us to look at inward opportunities for us to also create funds within our African continent that can support the work that we're doing, because we understand the pain points we have, especially when it comes to legislation, when it comes to governance, when it comes to community programs. We understand best what we need to do here. So let's take the call that when we live here, we also figure out how to fundraise locally. Okay? We figure out how to collaborate as communities that are in this particular space and take benchmarking opportunities to learn from each other across border. And we are open to visits in Kenya if you want to learn how workforce transitions look like. I think we are the best place position to explain how workforce transitions look like from Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you.